Some may know the Holy Bible as the Holy Book of Christians. However, in recent times it has been discovered that the Bible is so much more. The Bible talks about not just spirituality and the divinity of God, but it also recounts thousands of historical stories, such as the building of Jerusalem's temples, the slavery of the Israelites in Egypt, the construction of many ancient monuments in Jerusalem, etc. However, the credibility of biblical stories has been questioned for many years. There are those who think that archaeological discoveries would disprove the Bible, but it is just the opposite. Even archaeology proves that the Bible is an accurate source of historical information. In this video, we'll be looking at recent biblical archaeological findings which prove that the Bible is true. Gershon Galil, a professor of biblical studies and ancient history at the University of Haifa, recently disclosed that he had made the most important archaeological discovery in Israel. For most of his life, Professor Galil has contributed to the discovery of Israel's history through biblical records, and this recent finding could be a possible breakthrough in that field. He has discovered and deciphered 5 new monumental royal inscriptions of King Hezekiah of Judah. King Hezekiah was one of the greatest kings not just in the Bible, but also in the history of the past kings of Judah. Hezekiah's rule was truly remarkable, and it spanned from 715 to 687 BC. This period was highlighted by the rescuing of Jerusalem from the Assyrians and the reversion of the people back to God. Hezekiah's biggest goal as king was to abolish idolatry, and thus he demolished small altars dedicated to foreign gods and consolidated Jerusalem as the general place of worship. This was a huge contrast to the reign of his father, King Ahaz, which was an era known for its great wickedness, disregard for God, and idolatry. For these reasons, Hezekiah was a special king, and he had a close relationship with God, the kind that hadn't been seen before him and wasn't seen after him. Beyond spiritual reasons, Hezekiah's rule also saw through some massive engineering projects. And it is because of these projects that Hezekiah's reign has such an important historical and archaeological value. Hezekiah's role in Israel's history was confirmed in 2010 when his royal seal was discovered in a pile of rubbish not very far from the city of David in Jerusalem. The impression of the clay seal bears an inscription in ancient Hebrew that translates to, "Belonging to Hezekiah, son of Ahaz, king of Judah." The seal impression also depicts a 2-winged sun and Ankh symbols. According to history experts, the winged sun is a motif that represents God's protection as well as the legitimacy and power of the regime. Apparently, this symbol was widespread throughout the ancient Near East and used by the Assyrian kings as well. A team from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem made this discovery of Hezekiah's seal by sheer luck. Little did they know that more significant discoveries about King Hezekiah and his reign would be made in the coming years. Like many other kings of Judah, Hezekiah's rule was marked by unrest. This was because the Assyrian army posed a great threat to the city of Jerusalem, Judah at large, and most of the Middle East. Like the good king that he was, Hezekiah helped his people out of such a tumultuous time with the power of his foresight. During that time, the Assyrians led a conquest throughout the Middle East, seeking to conquer kingdoms and expand the Assyrian Empire. It was only a matter of time before the enemy showed up at Judah, and Hezekiah readied himself and his people for that. The king fortified the city walls against the siege, expanded his military, and built a 1,750-foot-long tunnel to provide a secret water supply into the city. When an invader laid siege on a city in those days, one of the first things he did was cut off the water supply to the city, making the city's inhabitants weak and desperate and easier to conquer and capture. To prevent this, a long underground tunnel was built to preserve the city's water supply. The tunnel served as a channel for water to pass through the Gihon Spring outside the city walls to the Pool of Siloam inside the walls. This extensive tunnel still exists today, and it is an example of how impressive ancient engineering was. It was carved purely out of stone using only crude tools. Yet the impressiveness of this crude infrastructure cannot be overlooked. The tunnel was given a downward slope, which propelled the movement of the water in the right direction. Also, several archaeologists believe the masons who constructed the tunnel dug from either side before meeting in the middle. For many, many years, the story behind the construction of the tunnel was the coolest part of its existence. This is mostly because past generations of archaeologists didn't have the right tools to conduct in-depth research on this ancient structure. In 1909, however, a French archaeologist, Louis Hughes Vincent, discovered a smooth piece of rock, but he believed that there was no inscription on it. In the coming years, more archaeologists disagreed with this fact, and one of them was Eli Shukran. Eli Shukran is a renowned Israeli archaeologist and licensed tour guide of the ancient remains of Jerusalem. He wasn't convinced that this previously discovered piece of rock had no inscription. So he teamed up with Professor Galil to do more research. To their greatest surprise, they found more than they were looking for. To the naked eye, the stone indeed bore no inscription, but upon closer inspection, it turns out there is more to it than meets the eye. Eli Shukran and Professor Galil took pictures of this rock in high definition and found intriguing and unexpected texts. Though eroded by time and other environmental factors, the vast majority of the letters on the stone remain legible. In all, the text contains 11 lines, 64 words, and 243 letters. After professional consultation, the text was divided into 5 components, namely title, the water project, the wars against Philistia, the reform, and the accumulation of property. Before we paraphrase and get into interpretation, let's talk about the literal content of the discovered text. The first line reads, Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah. Second line, made the pool and the conduit. Third line, in the 17th year, in the 2nd day, in the 4th month. Fourth line, of King Hezekiah, the king brought. Fifth line, the water into the city by a tunnel, the king led. Sixth line, the water into the pool, he smote the Philistines. Seventh line, from Ekron to Gaza, and placed there the Oreb unit of. Eighth line, the army of Judah, he braked the images and braked in pieces the Nehushtan. Ninth line, and he removed the high places and cut down the Asherah, Hezekiah the king. 10th line, accumulated in all his treasure houses and in the house of YHWH. 11th line, a lot of silver and gold, perfumes, and good ointment. In summary, the inscriptions on the stone reference Hezekiah's achievements as king, the religious restoration, the construction of the temple, the defeat of the Philistines, and the accumulation of properties. What's more, some portions of text appear in the Bible word for word, and others appear with slight alterations, especially in 2 Kings chapters 18 and 20. A verse in the Bible mirrored by these inscriptions is 2 Kings 18:8, which reads, He subdued the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory, from watchtower to fortified city. In 2 Kings 20:13, Hezekiah's wealth is described, and this description sounds awfully similar to some portions of the inscription. It reads, And Hezekiah was attentive to them, and showed them all the house of his treasures, the silver and gold, the spices and precious ointment, and all his armory. All that was found among his treasures, there was nothing in his house, or in all his dominion that Hezekiah did not show them. This has led archaeologists to believe that the missing letters and lines on the stone block could be the reason these texts are not seen word for word in the Bible. Maybe these are the missing pieces, and the inscription on the stone represents the earliest manuscript of the Bible. The Bible seems very put together, like a continuous story. But did you know that the big book is made up of smaller, independently written books? Like every book, the texts of the Bible were first biblical manuscripts before being incorporated into the Holy Book. There are tens of thousands of manuscripts of both the Old and the New Testaments, all of which exist in different languages: Ancient Hebrew, Latin, Greek, Aramaic, Syriac, and a few others. Some of the most popular manuscripts include the Dead Sea Scrolls, Septuagint, Codex Sinaiticus, and so on. But none of them date back as far as the smooth piece of rock that bore these biblical inscriptions. Therefore, Eli Shukran and Professor Galil may have discovered the oldest known biblical manuscript. These texts predate the Ketef Hinnom silver amulets, the previous oldest biblical manuscript, by about 100 years. Additionally, the Dead Sea Scrolls were made hundreds of years after these inscriptions were made. This discovery is an important proof that the biblical accounts of ancient Jerusalem and Judah are accurate. These biblical stories are based on chronicles and royal records, proving that the Bible reflects history, not someone's imagination. However, there are some parts of history that the inscription doesn't provide clarity to. For example, Hezekiah's war with the nomads, the lost conquests of Philistia, the Assyrians, Chaldeans, Egyptians, or the activity of Samaria. This is because royal records contained only the successions of the kings of Judah and the summarized version of the notable works of each king. In an ironic manner, this proves even more that the Bible's records of ancient Judah and Israel were based on royal records and inscriptions. The construction of the tunnel was one of the greatest achievements of Hezekiah's reign, and several archaeological findings have backed up this biblical story. However, Hezekiah's other actions have been backed up by archaeology, further proving that biblical stories are historically accurate. In 2 Kings chapter 18 verse 4, it states that he, Hezekiah, removed the high places and broke the sacred pillars, cut down the wooden image and broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days the children of Israel burned incense to it and called it Nehushtan. The destruction of Nehushtan was documented in the manuscript we talked about earlier, but recent findings have proved the demolition of strange altars. Evidence of Hezekiah's religious reforms has been discovered at Lachish, Arad, Tel Motzah, Beersheba, and Tel Aif. In Beersheba, for example, the famous four-horned altar dismantled during Hezekiah's reign was discovered, at least what was left of it. 3 of its 4 horns were found in secondary use in a wall, indicating the structure was no longer considered sacred. Smaller altars were also found in previously mentioned locations, some of which were converted into dump sites, as a symbol of desecration, just like it was mentioned in 2 Kings, chapter 10, verse 27. Then they broke down the sacred pillar of Baal and tore down the temple of Baal and made it a refuse dump to this day. All these discoveries are pieces of evidence that the Bible is more than just a religious book. It is also an accurate source of historical information, and if utilized by more archaeologists, even more than we already know about ancient Israel, is bound to be revealed. Which of the biblical archaeologies mentioned in this video did you find the most interesting? Let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.